空を越えてラララ星の彼方行くぞアトムジェットの限り心優しいラララ科学の子みんな旅立だ鉄腕アトム
Hello, and welcome back to our journey through the works of Osamu Tezuka. This is the second half of our trek through the 1950s, an interesting time for Tezuka filled with defining moments in early experimentation. Or, at least, the early 50s had a lot of defining moments. The late 50s, well, you won't get as many iconic manga, but you will get some more experimentation. Specifically, we're going to see Tezuka tread into the territory of manga not aimed at children, which he'll gradually do more of as the years go by. If you're watching this 3 parts into a retrospective, I doubt you need a reminder at this point of the video series goals and rules. But likewise, I think it's safe to assume you're invested by this point, so to make this fun, consider leaving a comment on the most interesting, shocking, or otherwise notable thing you learned in this video. I'm very curious to see what works or tidbits really grab your attention. But whether or not you decide to do that, with minimal spoilers, let's attempt to cover as much of Tezuka's works as we can, starting with 1955's... But wait, we're not going into 1955. At least, not right away. While this video was in production, I managed to acquire 2 books which were of some interest to me. The first is Tezuka Osamu Manga Taizen Kodomo no Showashi Bisasu Tayo, or Osamu Tezuka Manga Encyclopedia Children's Showa History Special Edition Tayo. This is essentially an encyclopedia of some of his works. And the second is Tezuka Osamu Karahiso Sakuhenshu, or Osamu Tezuka's Treasured Color Works Collection, a book mostly containing the original color versions of some of Tezuka's stories. And the important part of these books, and why I ordered them in the first place, is because they have some of the missing works I didn't have access to for the previous videos. But since I now do, let's rewind the clock a bit, as you enjoy my terrible pictures of these books' contents, so there's at least a picture of them somewhere on the internet and I can prove they actually exist. Back to the 1940s we go. Okay then, this should be easy enough. If we refer back to the miscellaneous works part of the video, we now have some of them. Make Tata Keuma is this 5-panel strip of a boy on stilts bullying another kid. Zosan no Skate, elephant skating, is these 2 panels of an elephant falling through ice. And Zo no Kushami, elephant sneezing, is this strip about an elephant at the zoo getting something stuck in his trunk. I also have what I believe are strips of the 40s incarnation of Guchan. But then there's something that has me honestly puzzled. From December of 1949 is Pin Pin Namachan or Pin Pin Seichan, a remake of Tezuka's original childhood work from the 30s. I don't know how I didn't mention this in the 40s video, but this exists. I knew about the remake that's going to appear later in this video, but somehow I missed the 40s incarnation. I must have tunnel vision when it comes to double checking my scripts to make sure I didn't miss something. This is becoming a trend at this point. Place your bets that next video starts with me letting you know about another thing I forgot, or will have some other last minute edit put in. But now, on to the early 50s. The first one I have to show is... well, I'm not entirely sure, but here's my best guess. This panel features Michan the rabbit alongside a character that looks like Kodama from Fossil Island, explaining first-person manga to the audience. This tracks because Fossil Island featured a first-person segment, which must have been a bit strange at the time, and this panel is shown alongside Fossil Island in the book I have as a pair. So my theory is, this is a panel included in the original print that was excluded in future reprints. The version of Fossil Island I have doesn't have this panel. Less complicated is Michan, a single-page story about Michan the rabbit trying to be a doctor for a sick pig. There's also Chikari-kun, which looks like a comedic work about kids doing New Year's things. I now have a better image of Uchu Ryoko, space travel, which correlates to the previous info I found about it being about mice going to space. And I have another one of the nature and fantasy stories, this time about how the universe is made. I'm now able to read the short work Yamagoya no Okari or Mountain Hut Lights. 2 kids are in a cabin during a blizzard when a bunch of adults come in, start bossing them around while burning extra wood, and then an avalanche traps them all. The adults burn more stuff, even their own skis, and when they try to burn the kids' things, the kids succeed at digging a tunnel and using their unburned skis to go get help. Then we have a weird one in Watashi no Rakugaki, or My Doodles. Trying my best with the translator and the messier writing, it's Tezuka telling a story about him reading the book version of the 1949 movie The Third Man, and thinking it would be great to have it set to music. Then he or a friend comes up with an idea for a part book, part music player thing, and I think a friend of his sold some books where each page had a spell, but then one of the books with electronics in it explodes. Or something. Again, the messier writing here really isn't helping the translator. Maybe someone who can actually read this will come along and clarify. Hanasaki Jisan, Old Man Blooming, is this page here of a guy injecting trees with stuff. Uchu Sutashan Barai no Yume, Space Station Dreams of the Future, is this page showing off a space station, along with some text of Tezuka explaining we'll need them to explore the vastness of space. I've got these strips, which I believe are from Guchan to Paiko Tami-chan Kyodai, siblings Guchan, Paiko-san, and Tami-chan. And finally, there's Fushigi no Kuni no Shogatsu de Arisu, New Year in Wonderland. It's basically like a Where is Waldo picture. For those confused, Where Waldo is a North American name for Where is Wally. For those still confused, Where is Wally is the actual name of Where is Waldo used outside of North America. And that wraps up the material that belongs to previous videos. Now let's get on what you all actually came here for as we enter 1955. Let's begin by getting an easy one out of the way. In 1955, Lost World got another adaptation in Adventure King magazine. I don't have any info on adaptional changes, and I've only got a small handful of images. Including referencing it when I talked about Jungle Emperor, Lost World just doesn't want to go away. But surely this will be the last time it comes up. On to something a bit more unique. We begin this video proper on a more subtle note. Akai Yuki, Red Snow, takes us to the icy land of Russia. We open on a girl named Minya, who's hated by the local villagers. Red snow fell from the sky on the day of her birth, which the town believes signaled her being a witch. She grew up with a kind heart and a beautiful singing voice, but the death of her mother and neglect of her father left her abandoned. A local church boy, Ivan, takes pity on her, becomes her friend, and takes her away, leading to them ending up in the employ of a noble after hearing Minya sing. The story then follows Minya's singing career and Ivan's unrequited feelings. Red Snow goes into the category of, I feel like this is based on something, but I'm not sure what. Historical figures appear, but I'm not seeing this as being based on true events. I'm also not seeing it as an old Russian story. Maybe someone will correct me? It feels a lot like a fairy tale, in a good way of course. It's a nice little story. It's also refreshing to see a different setting from Tezuka every now and then. The guy's a little Japan-centric. I mean, no duh, but if it's not that, it's some era of America. So the snowy land of Russia gives us a change of pace. But of course, we're immediately back to Japan with Tonkara Tani Monogatari, the story of Tonkara Valley. It opens on a dammed-off lake, which used to be the site of the titular Tonkara Valley. Going back in time, we find ourselves following a family of squirrels. They've been kicked out of the area after the father squirrel lost a fight against this buff boss squirrel named Sankaku. They get attacked by the local wildlife, the young Jiro gets separated from his family, and he gets picked up by the human child Sanai. It was probably a bad idea though, as a hawk notices the squirrel stack she's holding, attacks, and blinds the poor girl. Sanai's eyes will recover with rest, but for now, she adopts Jiro as her pet, and they live happily with Sanai's family, cat, and dog. But then a fire erupts, burns down Sanai's house, and kills her parents. She goes with her friend to live in the countryside, bring her pets along, and then she ends up kidnapped and lost in the woods. She just can't catch a break. Did a girl named Sanai really annoy Tezuka around the time he made this? On the bright side, she actually ended up in Tonkara Valley, allowing Jiro to find his family, abandoning Sanai in the process just to rub more salt in the wound, and Sanai's eventually found by a kind hunter who essentially adopts her. For once, this actually works out, and we follow the two stories of Jiro and his animal adventures alongside Sanai and her human stuff. The story of Tonkara Valley leaves me with some mixed feelings. Parts of it are interesting, for me it was the human-centric stories, but then the animal stories would have their turn and I didn't like them as much. Jiro's return to the forest and overthrowing the evil squirrel who tormented his family is just very plain and generic. Ultimately, I guess it's a very pro-nature message, but I came away thinking about just how brutal the beginning is. Speaking of beginnings, Tezuka's gonna start a little trend here in 55. We've seen him make original stories, adaptations, and works based on history by now, but a lesser thing he'd do time to time is actually make autobiographical works. He'd make short stories about his life that, when compiled together, accumulate a good bit. While not exactly a series per se, I'm gonna put all of these to the side and give them their own video at some point. Give us an eventual look at Tezuka's life through the lens of his manga. So, Boku no Shonen Jidai, My Boyhood, and future similar works will have to wait. Boku wa Ninji Yutsutsukai, or I'm a Ninjutsu User, is a whole 2 pages long. It follows a boy who decides it would be super cool to be a ninja, so his family fakes being a wizard to give him a magic scroll, and they play along by pretending his ninja skills work. I actually think it's a cute concept. I like this joke where he transforms into the mom, gets strong-armed into helping with the house finances to keep up the disguise. Tezuka's really short manga rarely gets much out of me, but this one got a chuckle, so good job. Next is Ryusei Oji, The Meteor Prince. The Meteor Prince starts out with the making of the film, The Meteor Prince. It stars the declining actor Ryutaro in the titular role, but he's not who we follow. Instead, we're concerned with the high schooler Tetsutaro, brought on as an extra. As the production finds itself in dire situations, this mysterious kid manages to solve any and all problems, causing Ryutaro to wonder about his background. Tetsutaro is tight-lipped about it, but the two will gradually become friends, and government conspiracies will bring everything to light. I like the beginning stages of this more than the payoff. The mystery of who this strangely competent high schooler is well done, and I liked how he and Ryutaro gradually warmed up to each other. The eventual reveal isn't that bad, but it's not as interesting as it could have been to me. The manga also touches on the effects of media influencing the youth, which was kinda neat, but it doesn't go fully in on the topic, which is a shame. I feel there's potential in a manga about the effects of media on kids, and whether including or framing certain scenes in certain ways could be a bad influence. By this point, we know Tezuka had some backlash in the past for stuff he put in his manga, so he may have been able to write something compelling from first-hand experience. In the end, the Meteor Prince, as in the movie within the manga, barely ends up mattering. It feels like the manga leaves loose threads with its premise. It's not the worst, but it feels a bit like a wasted idea. Next up, we have a trio of fairy tales, or fairy tale-like stories. The first is an adaptation of the classic Snow White. Nothing too complicated, it's the same story you all probably already know. Snow White is the most beautiful girl in the land, an evil queen tries to kill her, Snow White meets 7 dwarves and starts living with them in the woods, the evil queen tries to give her a poisoned apple, she falls off a cliff, and then a prince comes along and brings Snow White back to life or consciousness, depending on the version. No real comments on adaptational changes, but I do think the art is very pretty. Then we have Kujakusei, or Malachite. This is apparently an incomplete work, as the magazine that was publishing it ended, leaving only the first part to ever be made. The premise is about some statue being found in a pond in Scotland. It's moved to a museum, where it comes to life as a girl named Papaya. Then she sees a painting in the museum and heads off to find the painter. Following that, an old woman arrives looking for Papaya, saying something about being her guard and preventing her from marrying someone. Papaya finds the painter, and then the story ends. It feels like it may be based on something, but I'm not seeing it. If anyone knows, feel free to clue me in. Fortunately, I know the exact source of the picture book, Samushi no Koma, the Humpbacked Horse. Based on an old Russian fairy tale, which got turned into a 1947 animated film that Tezuka would see, it tells the tale of a boy named Ivan getting 3 magic horses, 2 black horses, and 1 humpbacked horse that can talk. Ivan finds himself working for the king, but an angry servant arranges for Ivan to go through several trials, which he'll pass with the help of his magic horse. Once again, this picture book version adapts the story pretty closely, with my biggest takeaway being that the art is once again very pretty. Also, that 1947 film was pretty nice. It was made by Ivan Ivanov Vano, and he himself remade it in 1975. Another creator that likes to remake his own stuff. That 1947 film, though, maybe just remember it exists for a little while. It might come up in the distant future. But following those fairy tales for children, we have Dai Santeikoku no Hokai, translated as Collapse of the Third Reich, so obviously it's a very lighthearted piece. It depicts a dystopia where the working class men and women are treated like machines more than people. They're euthanized when their efficiency drops, save for the attractive ones who become part of the leader's harem. Despite this, there's an overpopulation problem and food shortage, so the government decides the best way to deal with this is to incite an anti-government war. That way, they can justifiably kill a bunch of people and lower the population. It works too well though, and the rebels win the battle. The leader hides himself in a bunker and emerges to an abandoned world, with only his robots left. A tad more serious and depressing than Tezuka's other works at the time, this was more a commentary on government rather than anti-war nukes like usual. I don't think Tezuka had a good opinion of dictators. More importantly, this may be Tezuka's first adult manga, or gekiga. It has a less cartoony art style, was published in an adult-oriented magazine, and the subject matter is obviously not for children. At the very least, Tezuka says it's the first in the postscript interview for Rally Up Mankind from '67. So, there we go. Tezuka's first manga aimed at adults. Another landmark for him. It also means we'll get some more variety in his works every now and then. But clearly the evil dictator should have just tried wiping out the people with a flood. A bit like in Dai Kozuichi Dai, The Age of Great Floods. We open on the story of Noah's Ark being read to someone. The reader, a boy named Urashima, and the person he's reading to, his friend Taiji, living in an insane asylum. We soon learn the backstory that Taiji's family has government ties, and his older brother Samaya was involved in a new nuclear project. Taiji tried to destroy vital blueprints, causing a big fight in the family. This resulted in their mother's death and Taiji going insane. He also somehow grew a mane or something? I don't know. Well, the nuclear project was being made near the Arctic, and when something goes wrong and it explodes, a massive tidal wave starts heading for Japan. Chaos ensues, and the Age of Great Floods is fast approaching. This time around, the nukes are bad message is being literally equated to God smiting people for their sins. I don't know if Tezuka can one-up this. The Age of Great Floods actually has some good character drama between the family members, with the father's crushing guilt over the situation and the older brother's pride and eventual redemption. There's stuff to like, though the main protagonists are a bit bland in comparison. But really, the thing I'll remember most about this is Taiji's weird mane of hair. I mean, just look at it, it's so odd. Well, let's move on to something more... Nope, this one's weird too. Kanchu Shoujo no Horoki, Diary of a Wandering Insect Girl, is about an ant named Shimiko. She's a particular type of ant that gives off juices other insects like to drink. I tried to look into this, but I have no idea if this is a real thing. She arrives in the city to get hired for some job, only to find out it's a lot shittier than she thought. So Shimiko becomes a bug prostitute for others to taste her skin juice. Add that to the list of sentences I never thought I'd say. She gets caught in some corruption, flees from the authorities, and then she becomes a bug feminist for female rights. In the end, the male bugs beat her up, she tries to drown herself, but is saved by a human who shares similar struggles, and decides to keep on living with the new purpose. If collapse of the Third Reich didn't make it clear enough, this demonstrates Tezuka's gradual shift towards more mature content. I don't know what he was thinking when he wrote this, but it's certainly unique. Okay, this one's actually more normal. Soyokaze-san, translated as Miss Soyokaze, but sometimes as Zephyr, is a story about an overly kind girl named Soyokaze, or Gentle Breeze. She lives in the town of Minamoto-cho, which has a tense rivalry with the neighboring Hiracho, dating back hundreds of years. She and a Hiracho boy named Santa get involved with each other, sparking a feud as a big storm hits the area, breaking the local dam. The towns will get close to tearing each other apart, while Soyokaze and Santa strive to look past the conflict. Miss Soyokaze's got a Romeo and Juliet feel to it. It wouldn't surprise me if Tezuka knew the story. Soyokaze herself is also pretty princess-esque, with a never-ending well of kindness that attracts animals to her. It's a good little story about moving on from pointless grudges. And as a bonus, Tezuka would revisit the setting and characters in a few months, which we'll get around to in just a little bit. But before that, we have a few more manga to get through, like Arachi no Yosei, Storm Fairy. Part period piece, part fairy tale, it starts with the Lord's castle under siege, and his wife fleeing as he charges into battle. The wife deeply wishes for her husband's safety, and then she hears a voice in the woods. A witch appears and makes an offer. She'll save her husband, but the face of her daughter switches with the face of the witch's daughter. The deal is struck, the enemy surrenders, and when their child is born, the price is paid. Ruri is born deformed, causing her to grow up always wearing a mask. In contrast, the witch's daughter Hakobe is a beauty, but is too kind for the witch's liking. Fairy society is about trickery, and she's too good-natured. The two young women become acquainted one day in the forest when Hakobe strong-armed into stealing Ruri's mask, and while she gets it back before her face is seen, some people get an idea. Princess Ruri can't really prove her identity, and really, anyone wearing a mask could say they were her, so if the lord and lady were sent on vacation, Ruri were tossed out like a beggar and a fake were put in her place, you could control the land. An ambitious official does just this, using his equally evil daughter for the princess role. He also finds a blessed statue Hakobe laws which passively grants wishes, though it's honestly not that important. So Ruri is thrown out, no one believing who she says she is, and is found by a local swordsman who's too nice to leave her alone. The two of them will try to find Ruri's parents to prove her identity, while Hakobe finds out about the trouble she accidentally caused and takes it upon herself to be a local menace to stop the evil plot. I ended up quite liking Storm Fairy. It mixes a classic samurai-era tale with something more akin to a western fairy story. It's written quite well, the plot moving at a good pace, and the status quo changing every now and then. We have dual protagonists in Ruri and Hakobe, Ruri initially being quite pitiful, but she grows on you as she becomes accustomed to her situation, meanwhile Hakobe starts and ends as a joy. It's got action, it's got drama, and even a little romance. Overall, it's legitimately one of the better works I read from the 1950s. Antenna Ika, or Antenna Family, brings us back to the days of the 4-comma newspaper strip. This time it's not about children though, but seems to focus on Bon as a tired dad. Couldn't find much of it to read, just a few snippets, but it feels slightly aimed towards older audiences with its humor. Ahewa no Megami, or Oh God is a Piece, is another work of political commentary. Now I do actually have this, but as a very small image. Luckily an online plot synopsis is helping me make sense of it. Two countries each have their own goddess of peace, and fight each other over whose peace goddess is better. This gets way out of hand, until one day, the soldiers see the animals just watching them, and wonder how ridiculous they all must seem. They accidentally blow themselves up, and then in heaven, they find their two goddesses of peace fighting each other. Just your average satirical anti-war work. Up next is the 4-page manga Enochi no Mamechi Shaku, The Magnet of Life. An old man buys magnets from a boy, but forgets his change while paying. The boy then chases after him, running on to the rocket ship he's boarding. An accident happens and the old man needs to go outside to fix the problem, and with the boy's help, he uses the magnet to safely return to the ship, saving his life. Not much to say overall, but at least the title's accurate. Kazunoshin Gambaru, or Kazunoshin Gives His All, is another one I could read myself. This was a period piece taking place near the end of the Edo period, and it follows a boy named Kazunoshin. He's the student of a guy named Tessai, who's arrested for being friends with a foreigner. Kazunoshin avoids being captured too, and apparently goes to meet Itohiro Bumi, the first Prime Minister of Japan. Seems like this might be kind of based on history, not too sure where the story ends up going, but at least now you know a random fact for trivia night. Kuromimi-chan, or Little Black-Eared One, is another picture book. It tells the story of a black-eared baby fox being born in winter, and their parents worried about providing for the child in the off-season. The father fox tries to get an old human friend to help, but they've grown up to be a hunter, and the father never makes it home. The mother and child fox then make friends with the mother bear, who has their own cubs, and as far as I know, that's where the story ends. It doesn't feel that conclusive, but I don't have any more pages of it. But let's revisit a previous work, with the sequel to Miss Soyokaze, Himawari-san, Miss Sunflower. Soyokaze is still living in the country, being very Disney princess-like, and an acquaintance invites her to Tokyo to help teach her femininity to someone. That someone being a girl named Hiyuko, who's a bit too much of a tomboy and who Soyokaze nicknamed Sunflower for being tall and bright. Initially there's a bit of friction, but it's revealed Hiyuko's got a feminine side she keeps hidden, and she in turn tries to teach Soyokaze to stand up for herself more. One of Soyokaze's goals in Tokyo is actually to find her long-lost mother, and after Santa arrives to the city from the countryside, Soyokaze gets kidnapped, and he and Hiyuko team up to find her. That situation gets resolved without too many problems, and after that, Miss Sunflower actually becomes something of a teen drama. Relationships form, with a love, I'm not entirely sure, between the two girls, Santa, and maybe this other kid Soyokaze befriends. I don't know whether that's supposed to be platonic or romantic, but in a way, it's weirdly grounded for a Tezuka story, not that there isn't child bride abductions. but he almost just made a normal teen romance, and it wasn't that bad. It's funny how a normal, grounded story can feel so out of place because it wasn't weird enough. Tsuru no Izumi, Wellspring of the Crane, is another fairy tale adaptation, this time of the Japanese legend of the Graceful Crane, or the Crane Wife. It's the story of a young man who helps a crane out of trouble, and then on a snowy night, a beautiful woman arrives at his house. The two fall in love, but since the man is poor, the woman offers to weave beautiful fabrics behind a closed door. The only condition is that the man never looks inside when she's weaving. It seems there's some variation between tellings, but that's the gist of it. Tezuka's version is pretty close, but he also adds in this plot revolving around a greedy lord trying to get more money from the peasant man, and the lord's son trying to marry the mystery woman. Do they add much to the story? Not really, but the base narrative is a classic, and it holds up well. Next, we got another series returning from the 40s. I wasn't able to give 48's Guchan no Paiku a real look, but I do have a few forecasts of its remake, Guchan from 1956. It's a comedy series focused around the family and friends of the titular Gu. From what I was able to read, there were a few funny jokes in it, and sometimes a sweet family moment. Besides that, it's another 4 about kids, for kids. I honestly just don't have much to say about it. So much for giving it a real look. Same goes for Heitai Kashimasu, or Outland Boy Troops, though in this case it's because I don't have all of it. Or at least, I'm assuming there's more. It's about a country with an overpopulation problem or something, with its citizens being unremarkable except for their above average bravery. So they sell them as soldiers to other countries, with us seeing 2 soldiers ending up recognizing each other on opposite sides. That's as far as I have, and I assume it has something more akin to an ending. That's a few manga in a row I just didn't have much to say about. Let's change that with something I rather enjoyed. O Warewa Sanin, or We 3 is next, and this was honestly a bit of a pity for reasons you'll soon see. A new group of boys have started high school. Among them is an impulsive but honorable guy by the name of Sasaki Kojiro. He's named after the famous swordsman, and for good reason, as he's an inheritor of a kendo dojo. He starts his first day by proving he's the toughest guy around, but finds himself matched by a local trickster magician, Sarutobi Sasuke, named after the famous ninja, and the bulky and justice-seeking Takachio Hideo, named after... I don't know. When I look at the name, I mostly just get references to this. It feels weird that he'd be the only one not named after someone. Comment if you know what the deal is here. At any rate, the 3 of them end up growing a mutual respect for each other and become good friends. A bit of trouble gets caused when a politician and reporter trash Sasuke's ramen shop and threaten to get him and Kojiro expelled, but with their combined efforts they manage to avoid it, while the politician gets away scot-free. Surely everything will be fine. Then, we get a time jump and a date. 1941. This is a wartime series following these 3 youths as they take different paths through a tumultuous time in Japan. Kojiro gets conscripted into the army by his father, beating another guy by the name of Miyamoto Musashi, who jokes about them being destined for each other. Sasuke's intelligence makes him try to get a proper education and go into science, but the corrupt politician from before appears again. Meanwhile, Hideo's job at the newspaper gives him a chance to look at different facets of the war, but he may not like what he sees. Aoi 3 is shaping up to be a really good story, where Tezuka can put his wartime experiences into these 3 characters and explore what they each go through. And that was the plan, but it didn't happen. In the postscript interview for this work, Tezuka outlines the idea and how this series was supposed to go until the end of the war. Kojiro would show what it was like to be in the army, while Sasuke and Hideo would demonstrate different aspects of civilian life. There was some real potential here, but unfortunately, the series was cancelled for an unspecified reason. It's not the first time we've seen this happen, but boy does it sting here. Aoi 3 feels like it could have been great, but we never got to see the payoff it was building up to. At least what we got is still pretty good, and Tezuka would reuse at least parts of the idea. The destined battle between Sasaki Kojiro and Miyamoto Musashi coming up in a couple years, and Hideo's journalist angle being worked into something else. Until then, Aoi 3 will remain a what-if on the list of great Tezuka war manga. Following that highlight, there's Abusutora-ka, or Abusutora House, a short little manga about a man visiting the Abusutora family house to ask for their daughter's hand in marriage, but they're all artists, so hijinks ensue. The final joke is some punchline about what they watch on TV that I just don't understand because it's some kind of reference. But, coming into May of 1956, Tezuka's rebooted that Phoenix manga from 54. This still isn't the start of the real Phoenix manga, but it's another important step. Also interesting is that while the 54 version was in a shonen magazine for boys, this was published in a shoujo magazine for girls. There was a whole demographics change. Not much else to say besides stay tuned for the eventual Phoenix video. Shiroi Kubino ko Gamo, the white-necked duckling, is a 3-page story about a duckling with a white neck. No duh. They're born to a happy duck family, but as they're preparing to migrate for the year, a fox attacks, injuring the duckling so they can't fly. The mother duck thinks their child is dead and flies off, so the duckling must survive the winter and the fox with the help of the local rabbits. A bit of a palate cleanser, it's a cute story for the kids that shows you can stand up to bullies. Nichi no Toride, the Rainbow Fortress, takes us back to the world of Arabian Nights. The city of Baghdad has a local thief causing trouble by the name of Black Cat. In truth, she's Mimi, trying to provide for her poor mother, who separated herself from her husband on account of him being the legendary leader of the 40 Thieves. She won't take Mimi's stolen goods to get by either, wishes she would become an honest person. Mimi agrees, and upon smashing a stolen pot out of frustration, she discovers an assassination plot for the arriving Prince Harun. Harun has come to Baghdad on a friendship with the Sultan, and to compare treasures, but the Sultan and his evil advisor who put out the assassination contract are after a particular treasure of his, the Rainbow Fortress. It's said it has the power to grant any wish. Mimi and the prince end up coming into contact, and she also tries to convince her dad to become a good person, but plots are underway and an adventure will be had. While Tezuka's odd Arabian Nights had a little bit of Arabian Nights flair, the Rainbow Fortress styles it up, including snippets from a lot of different stories. From 40 Thieves to Sinbad, it's got it all. In the postscript interview for it, Tezuka says Rainbow Fortress was supposed to be like an Arabian version of Princess Knight. I can definitely see some similar aspects. He also mentions the work being in color, and how much of a shame it is that the versions you'll likely find these days aren't. As I said in my last video, I agree it's disappointing. I now have a color version of it, and it looks great. Manga Seibutsugaku, or Manga Biology, sees us return to Tezuka's classroom. On the syllabus today isn't anything to do with manga though, but as the title indicates, biology. Tezuka takes us through some very creative depictions of biology, teaching us about things like bacteria, the origin of life, evolution, and reproduction. Tezuka's always been a science nerd, so this makes a lot of sense. And hey, maybe he tricked a child into learning something. It doesn't really house self-contained stories like we saw at Manga University. This time around it's a bit more focused on being educational, so in terms of entertainment value I don't know if I'd really recommend it, but if you were a Japanese child in the mid-50s, this may have been a fun way to learn about the natural world, and I'll give Tezuka credit for trying to educate the kids. I'm not a fan of manga biology, but I can appreciate what it's doing. Next up, we have a fun one. Lion Books isn't like the other manga we've seen so far. It's the first of several Tezuka anthology works, a bunch of non-connected one-off stories published under the same banner, in this case frequently with a sci-fi twist. This won't be the last time we see one of these. Heck, Lion Books specifically will return later on, but as for how I'm going to cover them, I'll just quickly give the base premise for each story and then overall thoughts. So without further ado, Kitaru Beki Jinrui, Future Humans, follows a bunch of people returning to Earth from Venus after a nuke wrecked the planet. They land to find people alive but severely weakened and debate between staying and fixing the planet or going back to Venus. Kuroi Uchusen, the Black Space Ray, starts with a mysterious death with no obvious cause. Upon investigating, a detective believes it has to do with something called black radiation and some particular scientists. This also seems to be the first appearance of Geta, who will be Tezuka's go-to policeman character for a bit. We'll see him around. Uchukuko, Spaceport, is the story of Earth making a shared space station with numerous alien races to coexist and become friends. A criminal group makes their base there, and the story follows people investigating after a child kidnapper goes into hiding. Midori no Neko, the Green Cat, starts with the setup of the army targeting a particular green cat in a rundown building. The cat's owner goes in to negotiate with the animal, and then we flash back to see the life he had and what's up with the mysterious green cat. Kyofu Samyaku, Terror Mountains, is the story of a guy returning to his mountain village to study earthquakes. But between the village chief who used them to get away with murder and an old woman who can somehow foretell them accurately, alongside people not believing his seismometer is a seismometer, he'll have a bit of trouble. Karuta Kokyo, the Crazy Border, takes us to the Antarctic, where two societies live, and it's deadly to try and cross the border from one to the other. But because the border seems to be constantly shifting, a geologist is brought in to investigate. The geologist character is actually the same one as Terra Mountain's Ogaki Ryuta, so maybe all these stories aren't entirely separated. Fukuga Majin, Compound Eyes Monster, starts during a war, where a child is surgically given eyes that can see lies. The government finds out, uses him to detect spies, and then he escapes. The boy resurfaces from being a hermit after making friends with the group from Abui 3, and the politicians work to silence him before he can reveal their secrets. Hakosu Sencho, Skeleton Skipper, follows this weirdly hairy human man whose job is to prevent overpopulation by taking randomly selected children to the moon and leaving them there to die. There appears to be a phantom entry in this line book series, so Seiji Sasujin Jiken, or Twin Murder Case. For some reason it looks like it was left out of future reprints, but I don't know why. For the record, the next entry also was, but it is included in another book. As you may expect from the title, it involves a murder case. A doctor famous for an operation separating Siamese twins is found dead, and the hunt for the killer is on. Apparently, it also features the return of geologist Ogaki Ryuta, and these three works were a mini-series of sorts within Lion Books, dubbed Earth Theater, or something along those lines. And rounding off the bunch, there's Koya no Dankon, Bullet Holes on the Plains. This one takes us back to the Wild West, following an ex-soldier named Dud, leader of a bandit gang. After a train robbery, they try to hide out in a nearby town, which turns out to be Dud's home. While his family is happy to see him, he needs to hide his past and hope his fellow bandits don't get too out of hand. Really, this one's got no real sciencey stuff to it compared to everything else. Its ending also got changed in later editions to something sadder. And there you have it, the first set of Lion Book stories. Most have a sci-fi leaning, 3 of them are linked through a shared character, and reprints aren't complete. I'd say my favorites were Green Cat, Compound Eyes Monster, and Skeleton Skipper. The others didn't really interest me too much. That's just what happens with a short story collection. It's inherently a mixed bag. Not bad though, and maybe I'll have better overall opinions on later Tezuka anthologies. Following the collection is another short story. Original title Shirei Gosen Shichiji, but renamed to Gosen Shichiji no Chikashitsu, The Order 7 AM. It follows a group of thugs being hired to assassinate a scientist named Robbie. They somehow decide the best way to do this is to plant a time bomb underneath his hotel room in the hotel room below. This means they have to take a father and son hostage and wait in the room for hours for the timer. This plan is definitely not overly complicated, and as expected, things will go wrong. My main takeaway, I think the premise is a little silly. The next 3 works are all just one page, so starting us off with some really short ones, we have Arashi no Mai no Monogatari, Story Before the Storm. It's a wartime story about a group of soldiers at war. The problem is that during their deployment, they've befriended many animals, and can't bear to just leave them to whatever fate is in store. So they try to take the animals away from the fighting, end up exchanging shots with another soldier, and as the 2 of them lie dying, they realize they were both trying to save the animals. A very Tezuka premise. Then we have Terrier-kun? Is this supposed to be terrier, or is it an actual name? It looks like the Japanese way of spelling terrier is slightly different. At any rate, it's a cute dialogue-less strip about a terrier-looking dog. And then there's Sarukari Gassen no Shinso, or The Truth Behind the Battle of the Monkey and the Crab. The Crab and the Monkey is apparently a Japanese folktale about a monkey that steals persimmons from a crab, kills him, and then the crab's children try to get revenge. This manga is supposed to be a parody of that. It feels like this would be better if I grew up knowing the original tale, but to me this is just some random thing I don't fully get. Back to something a little bit longer, we have a few short works in a row. Kid no Uroko, The Golden Scales, is another fairy tale adaptation. This time it seems to be based on the Russian The Tale of the Fisherman and the Fish, a variant of the Grimm's The Fisherman and His Wife. It looks like this story has multiple regional versions, but the Russian one has a goldfish, so I'm picking it. A young boy goes to the water to fish and ends up catching a goldfish. The fish then asks him to spare it, saying he'll give the boy one of his scales, claiming that if the boy were to toss it and make a wish, it will be granted. This turns out to be true, and the boy gradually wishes for more and more things. Eventually, the boy loses everything, and the moral of the story is not to be greedy. Shirakashi-kun, translated to Messy Boy, is the story of a boy who just can't seem to clean up properly, so his family buys him a robot to help him out. but no matter how many times he shows the robot what to do, by demonstrating how to clean, it won't learn. Eventually, it's revealed the robot is the kid's dad in a costume, teaching him how to clean up in a roundabout way. A short, cute little story. Suzumushi Hime, the Bell Cricket Princess, is the story of a cricket girl, Suzu, who plays the best music in the land. The king invites all musicians to compete in a tournament, and when she wins, Suzu is made princess. But then, the king keeps her locked up, and she and the villagers who used to listen to her get lonely. In the end, the citizens break her out, and everyone's happy again. Then to end our bunch of shorts for now, we have Budokai e Kita Akuba, the devil who came to the dance. A masquerade ball is being held, filled with wealthy guests, but word comes out that a member of the revolutionaries, the Danube Fox, has infiltrated to steal everyone's jewelry. Lily, a girl shunned because her mother joined the revolutionaries, seems to be targeted. The guard captain assures her of her safety, and a man disguised as a devil solves the crime. The one targeting Lily turned out to be a man after her inheritance, but the man in the devil costume is revealed as the real guard captain. It's revealed the man who looked like the guard captain the whole time was the real Danube Fox, Lily's mother, who just came to the party to see her daughter. Now, I know we've covered a lot of manga so far in the video. Tezuka was very busy during the 1950s, but if I could grab your attention for the next entry, this is a work that is actually pretty interesting. Kogane no Trunk, or the Golden Suitcase, is different from Tezuka's other works. Think back to Galaxy Boy and how parts of that had elements of a Gekiga-style manga. Its art was less cartoony, its framing more dramatic. The Collage of the Third Reich and some other shorts also went to that territory, but only just a little bit. They were mature, but short. Golden Suitcase is the longer follow-up to those little experiments. In an interview about the series, Tezuka himself doesn't refer to it as Gekiga, but said it had elements of it. A touch. Perhaps you could say that this is Tezuka's first non-short Gekiga manga, or at the very least, it's a contender. Aside from the art style, you also notice a change in layout. Golden Suitcase is a picture story, just like Galaxy Boy, although this time it doesn't give up on the style. Its pages are a lot more dynamic instead of being constrained by traditional panels. It's a bit of a looker at times in my opinion. It was also published in color, though future prints only do it in black and white for some reason. It probably made the titular Golden Suitcase stand out in a fact that's just lost. But more to the point, in my opinion, this is a landmark work for Tezuka in terms of his art. It's toning down the cartoonishness compared to what he made before. It's still his style, but a tad more mature. I mean, it's not the first time he's done it, but it's the first time he's done it to this extent, and for a publication around a volume long. And for what it's worth, the story is also quite decent. One day, a mysterious masked man walks into a hotel, carrying a shining golden suitcase. He identifies himself as Shunsuke Otari of the Japan local newspaper. He stays the night with everyone present talking about his suitcase, but come morning, he's vanished, leaving behind his clothes and the golden case. After this, chaos ensues. The police get called, the suitcase gets stolen, and they find Shunsuke Otari in another town with no idea what's going on. He arrives at the scene and even manages to find the case with the help of his little brother Fujio, but then a headless man shows up and disappears just as quickly. The case becomes the subject of national interest, especially when the scientific community determines it's not gold. And then, in front of Fujio and his cousin Hiroko, Shinsuke's doppelganger from the hotel appears, asking for the suitcase and producing golden balls as payment. This is a mystery series following multiple characters and perspectives, and I thought it was pretty good. The mystery itself was handled well, and I thought the way the story's told, mainly through narration, really worked. I liked how many factions got involved in the end, and it kept me guessing on where it was all going. Shinsuke and Fujio are pretty standard as protagonists, but they aren't bad, and there's enough of a supporting cast to vary it up. The Golden Suitcase, from its presentation and its story, ended up being one of the better Tezuka works from the 50s. It's also, maybe, Tezuka's first longer step into more mature content. If it is, it'll pay off in the years to come, but even if it's not, it's still a nice little experiment and a good little read. Kariyu Dobachi no Ohanashi, or Story of the Hunter Wasp, is another shorter picture story. A mother wasp leaves her child to go hunting for food, and an old lady arrives with her own child. They trick the wasp child, bury them underground, and the mother wasp feeds the old lady's disguised kid instead. I guess they look similar enough? The mother wasp realizes the mistake, finds her real child, and proceeds to kick the others out. The child wasp then grows up and eventually makes amends with the other kid. Cheapo Konnichiwa, or Afternoon Little Cheapo, gives us a more child-friendly series about a cat. Said cat, named Cheapo, was found and raised by mice before being returned to his parents, and because of this, he won't engage in one of the most important and fundamental activities of being a cat, hunting mice. A bit of an embarrassment to his family, we follow Cheapo as he helps the mice in his local area, eventually finding himself in a land where cats and mice have kingdoms. Then it turns out that part, which is most of the run, is all a dream, and we get a few more stories with him before the series ends. Or at least, this run of the series. Afternoon Little Cheapo gets technically 2 revivals in the 70s, though they're right next to each other, thus feeling like one, but taking a look at just the 50s version of the character, what do we have? It's a pretty simple but cute story about an innocent boy trying to do the right thing. There's a fun part where Cheapo ends up in Tezuka's house, but I don't think this was really for me. Maybe a kid reading this would find it quite enjoyable, but personally, it's just not connecting. Instead, I found myself liking Zoka no Hokeshi, the rank in the jewel. We open on a woman about to jump off a cliffside road and kill herself. Her name is Kenko and she works at a magazine, but isn't well regarded due to her less attractive looks, the guy she likes isn't interested, and she's even made to take the fall for something that she didn't do. Counter to her is the actor Ishiyuki, blessed with amazing looks that end up causing him trouble and get in the way of his romantic life. He has a girl he's seen, and she likes him, but being a super handsome actor causes their private time to not really be private. Ishiyuki is driving along, frustrated with life, when he ends up getting into an accident with Kinko. The two end up fairly unharmed, and in fact, better than before. Kinko absorbing Ishiyuki's attractiveness, and Ishiyuki losing it, allowing each of them the chance for the life they want. It's not permanent, as somehow the two can switch between the two states by getting hit by another car, and they use their new gifts to go about their lives. We mostly follow Kinko though. No explanation for them not getting injured through multiple car collisions. Sometimes it's a light bump, but others, whatever, let's just roll with the premise. The rank in the jewel certainly has a more mature feel to it. It revolves around adult relationships, how attractiveness affects how others treat you, and lightly touches on themes of a sexual nature. Kinko, in her attractive form, solves problems twice by stripping and stunning her adversaries with her looks. A lot of the characters also feel more grounded and realistic compared to ones we've seen before. I do feel it focuses a bit too much on Kinko though, and that Ishiyuki's journey of making himself ugly could have been a good read. The two of them together is also underused. They meet a handful of times to acknowledge their situation and say they'll figure out what's going on, but then they just don't. It feels like a setup for something that doesn't ever happen. And for a final complaint, the ending wasn't the best in my opinion. Kinko's desire to be liked for herself despite her looks doesn't exactly happen, which feels a tad upsetting. But criticisms aside, I had a good time with the rank of the jewel. It shows us Tezuka experimenting with more mature storytelling, and he's not half bad at it. Now that that's done, let's go back to something more sci-fi aimed at a younger audience, with Senpu Z, or Whirlwind Z. In some point in the future where super science exists, lives Dr. Takamura. He's a famous scientist who's made a lot of inventions that help people, a real believer in science for the greater good. But then there's Dr. Hebinuma, another competent scientist who can't stand having people be better than him. So he challenges Takamura to a science duel, forcing him to accept. Takamura, secretly followed by his family, tries to reason with Hebinuma, but it amounts to nothing, and an accident causes everyone at the scene to die, save for Hebinuma and Takamura's infant son. Growing up raised by a robot who resembles his mother, Takamura's son becomes Z, a genius scientist with the goal of exposing Hebinuma's corrupt nature and preventing science from being used for evil. Whirlwind Z follows his exploits, getting into trouble with the police, fighting against an evil scientist who goes by X, and revealing the truth behind Hebinuma, all with the help of his mother robot Jet, who turns into a rocket for him to fly around on. If you prefer Tezuka's more shonen boy hero sci-fi stuff, this is right up your alley. If you're here looking for complex characters, well, Z himself does have the occasional moment of depth, but overall, Whirlwind Z is mostly about the cool science stuff in the action. Hebinuma is just an evil scientist that needs to be the best. X is much the same. The characters aren't bad, just simple. While not my favorite, it's still a bit fun, and I can see where people would like this work. Now Whirlwind Z would end up getting 2 sequels in the coming year, but they mostly just work as small extra adventures set after the original story. Super X Jiken, or the Super X incident, follows Z as he investigates a top swimmer acting weird and a strange ship. And surprisingly, it doesn't feature the return of Scientist X, which you think would be a given considering the title. This one's actually a bit strange, with Z really being more boy detective here than scientist. It's like a different character. And following it is Juzo no Kai Shinzo Ken, the 13 mysterious statue incident, where Z investigates a mysterious society that revolves around ancient ruins and aliens. This one's actually got returning characters in it, connecting it to the original, but there's still not much to say about it. That actually applies to the next few works we have to talk about, so let's blast through them all. Azarashi ni Totsuka Ratahi, or The Day I Was Bitten by a Seal, is a story about Bon working as a manga artist. He gets a job to make something about seals, goes to the zoo to learn about them, and ends up acting like a seal himself. I think this was solely made to make a joke about Bon's mustache. Next is Okasan no Ashi, or Mother's Leg, a short 3-page story that Tezuka previously did in the early 50s. It introduces us to a mother cat with 3 legs, who tells the tale of how she got that way to her kittens. She used to be the cat of a hunter in Africa, but when she gave birth to kittens, the extra weight meant the plane couldn't take off. The hunter threatened to leave the kittens behind, so the mother purposely let one of her legs be eaten by an alligator so the plane could fly and she could keep her kittens. Once again, I'm mostly just confused about the weight of a cat's leg being the threshold for a plane to take off. Following that is Haha no Me Banashi, Mother's Eyes. I guess Tezuka just really liked the motif of mothers sacrificing body parts around this time. This was another adaptation, being based on the Japanese story, The Snake Wife. A man ends up married to a snake after saving it in the past, and the manga starts much after that when they have a daughter. The truth of the snake wife's identity comes to life, so she flees, telling her daughter where to meet her if she's ever in need. When the father falls ill, the daughter seeks out the mother and she's given an orb to heal him. But then greedy townsfolk take it as taxes, so the mother provides a second, revealing that they're her eyes. In the end, the greedy townsfolk try to get the second one, but a terrible storm of snake vengeance teaches them a lesson. Time for another work mostly notable for a nitpick I have. Mignon is a short adaptation based on a part of Goethe's book, Wilhelm Meister's Apprenticeship. It tells the tale of a gypsy dancer named Mignon. We're shown an old man looking for his long-lost daughter, believing she'll recognize his harp playing. Then Mignon gets abused by their master, and is saved by a guy named Wilhelm. Wilhelm's female companion is performing a concert later that night, but a stomachache leads to Mignon taking their place. The gypsy master tries to kill Wilhelm, Mignon prevents it, and it turns out Mignon was a girl all along and the old man's daughter. Now, I'm not going to go into the original Goethe version since this 9-page manga clearly isn't trying to match it, but you might be confused about something I just said. If you're looking at the images in the video, you might be surprised to learn Mignon thought she was a man. In the original story, it looks like they were supposed to be androgynous, and it just doesn't work here. Tezuka so clearly drew a girl. When Mignon claimed to be a man, I thought it might have been a mistranslation. But in this version of the story, assuming this translation is right, I guess she never learned human anatomy and thought it was true? It's just a weird plot point that doesn't work in narrative or for the audience. Tezuka just clearly drew a girl. Next we have another mystery solver join the extended crew, with Kokeshi Tante Kyoku, Kokeshi Detective Agency. This time around, our detective is no boy, teen, or adult man, but a little girl named Pako, who has no sense of fear. This allows her to always see things with a clear mind, and not to get intimidated when looking for the truth. Together with her cowardly brother, they'll solve some strange incidents around town. Yet another Tezuka detective, this time around aiming to be cute. While there's certainly some comedic value in everyone but the little girl being scared, I don't feel like Kokeshi Detective Agency had much to offer. Just a handful of small stories that might give a small chuckle. Perhaps you'd better enjoy Pink no Tenshi, or Pink Angel. In this manga, there exists the sunset clouds that everyone likes, and the rain clouds that hate them because of jealousy. Among the sunset clouds is Pink, a sentient cloud interested in the human world who likes to go down and help people. An incident has caused the rain cloud Brown and his daughter Sepia to hold a grudge against Pink, but the story will follow her encountering some young girls in trouble and using her shapeshifting powers to save the day. A bit more interesting in my opinion, Pink Angel provides a cheery, fun protagonist and some short but decent plotlines. It's mostly on the simple side, but Tezuka still couldn't resist putting in an anti-bomb message in his fun manga for little girls. I do wish we got a bit more world building about the clouds and their politics though, but it's a minor complaint for an otherwise alright story. We once again return to the classroom with Manga 10 Bungaku, Manga Astronomy. Very similar to manga biology, it talks about various related topics such as constellations, planets, and the possibility of alien life, all through a comedic lens to make it fun for the kids. Likewise to its biology counterpart, I don't particularly like it, but I can appreciate the attempt at educational entertainment. In the previous 50s video, you may recall Biko's Babysitting, the story about a little bee girl looking after a caterpillar. Well, she returns in a collection of stories titled Biko-chan, a nice colorful picture book. I don't have it for myself to comment on, but what information I could find indicated it being rather well received. For the record, it looks like Biko may have had a second book in 58, but I'm not too sure on the details. It looks like it may have essentially just been part 2 of the 57 book. I think that's enough child-friendly stuff for now. Let's go for a tone shift. Hito Shoku Misaki no Kessen, the final battle at Cape Cannibal, takes on some more serious subject matter. It depicts a group of Japanese soldiers at war, struggling against a new model of tank they call the Queen of Shiva. They're trying their best, but command is tired of not making real progress. Lieutenant Itsuki is well liked by his men, but talking back to his superiors earns him a troop filled with the platoon's dead weight, as he's ordered to become a diversionary sacrifice. A soldier's gotta do what a soldier's gotta do, and he'll try his best to make sure his men make it through the day. Cape Cannibal is a good short war story. While we don't know that for long, Tezuka manages to capture his characters well, and while he doesn't draw it gruesomely, his art captures the chaotic and brutal battle. I wish this one was a little bit longer. And sticking with the mature content, following that, we have Hyotan Kamako, or Calabash Kamako, a calabash being a type of gourd that ties into a motif the manga uses. The story opens on a ship where a woman has been locked in a freezer. Some guys passing by hear her banging on the door and decide to let her out. Who she is and how she got there, a temporary mystery. We're filled in when the ship makes port, and a scientist named Rokuro reveals to his wife that this woman was his cargo. Her name is Kamako, and she was found in the Antarctic as part of a primitive tribe. He brought her back to study and is a little worried when he finds out she escaped. The problem isn't just that Kamako doesn't know how Japanese society works, it's also that she has some kind of superhuman abilities, increased strength and such. She also seems to fall in love with anyone who gives her an apple. Rokuro finds her pretty fast though, and we see them live together for a bit as Kamako learns how Mars society works. And then the plot takes a swerve. One day, Kamako just walks off, gets involved with an actor, gets roped into a cult, and some other stuff happens with barely anything to do with her being scientifically studied. Characters are looking for her the whole time, but the story is mainly about Kamako falling in love with this actor. For what it's worth, Calabash Kamako follows the rank in the Jewel as being a more mature series. Kamako definitely has curves compared to previous female characters. The cast also consists entirely of adults. In a way, it's a fun diversion compared to Tezuka's typical works, but on the other hand, it feels like a setup for something we never get to. A bunch of cool theories Rokuro gives about Kamako before he disappears from the plot end up going nowhere, the truth about Kamako being a bit underwhelming. A unique entry among Tezuka's manga at the time, Calabash Kamako ended up being alright, but I feel like its initial hook was more interesting than what we ended up getting. Sadly, a disappointing ending also goes with our next topic, Chikyu Tyson, the Earth War. Dontaro Aranami is the son of a brilliant scientist. Planes have managed to pass the speed of sound, and now his father is trying to surpass the speed of light. He made a plane to do so, but the failed test left him injured and with a weird cosmic disease. The family takes a train ride to go to a special hospital, but then it gets hijacked. While going through the Urameshian Empire, they stop the train to locate a spy for the Human Bacteria, a rebel organization that opposes their government. They lead all the passengers off under the pretense of inspection, but the truth is, they plan to murder them all. Dontaro and his mom manage to escape, but his dad is recognized and forced to develop his light-speed plane for the Empire. Fleeing into the mountains, Dontaro will find a member of the Human Bacteria, learn of their battle against tyranny, and become a member himself to fight for the sake of the world. The Earth War starts off strong. It's dark and with a real sense of tension, the Empire being an actual threat. Dontaro is on the ropes a lot of the time, instead of always having things go his way. And then, right around halfway, so I'm allowing it for the non-spoiler rules, it's aliens. Aliens have invaded and are using a liquid that turns people evil, and that's why the Empire is evil. Any nuance or interesting motivations, completely killed. I did not care for this twist. Even if the Empire was just evil for the sake of it, that would have been better than them being controlled by aliens. This was a cool espionage thriller, and then it gets the aliens treatment. There's still some dark scenes in the later half, some gruesome implications, but it's all in the service of the aliens' evil maker goo. I really did like where the Earthworm was going. It felt like a dark twist on Tezuka's typical boy hero stories, where even though Dantaro tries hard, he's gonna fail and people will die. But it ends up giving us a twist that, in my opinion, only serves to weaken the plot. Following that, we return to our manga lessons again, going from university to a classroom, and now to Manga Chugaku, Manga Junior High. For the snippets I have, Tezuka seems to go more into art fundamentals, going over proportions, faces, and breaking things down into shapes. Eventually, Tezuka's gotta start numbering these, or else he's gonna run out of schooling levels. And starting us off for 1958, you may remember a little landmark series from 53, Princess Knight. It's got a sequel now, originally also named Princess Knight, but nowadays it goes by Futago no Kishi, or Twin Knights. More details to come when we go over that franchise in its own video. In the future, most things I'd say for their own videos will likely be glossed over like this, if not skipped if I feel there's no reason to bring it up. I've technically already done this, but hey, I've gotta keep some surprises for later. Mirai o Nozuku Sanri, or 3 Who Can See the Future, is another short, almost despite its premise. 3 men get the ability to see the future. One of them is a young boy, Rock, who struggles with and hates his new gift. The other 2, Bon and Duke Red, become a prophet and crime boss respectively. It gives us a good start for a story exploring how they all use their powers, but at only 8 pages, we don't really get a lot. Feels like this could have been at least a little longer to develop the idea, but as it stands, it's just a bit underbaked. Next, we have Katen wa Konya mo Aoi. The curtain is still blue tonight. It starts with the opera star Chidori in the middle of a performance, when suddenly she screams and collapses. The cause? The confetti. It turns out she has an extreme phobia of the color red. Like, really extreme. Panic attacks and fainting extreme. No idea how she lives her everyday life when nothing around her could be a very common color. You figure there would always be at least one audience member wearing red, or just a lot of red things in public, but let's just accept the premise. Chidori's fine for now, but her younger sister gets worried. Another suitor seems to be trying to replace her, and then a threatening letter appears saying Chidori's gonna be assassinated. Their grandma then reveals that Chidori was adopted, and is the last royal of another country who was tortured as a baby with the red whip, causing the phobia. I'd think a baby is fragile enough that heavy whipping would kill them, but admittedly, I've never tortured a baby myself, so what do I know? In the end, the stage director was the villain all along, the other suitor was a secret detective, and then the director bids farewell to the reader by revealing themselves as another person. I honestly have no idea what this is. Is this a reference to something? I don't think I've seen it in any other Tezuka stuff. Maybe it's a Japanese thing? This story gives me so many questions. Next up is Kimiyona Dairoku, A Strange Journey. Strange isn't an unfitting descriptor for it, but it's mostly another confusing story. Dr. Asahi has developed a vaccine for a terrifying infectious disease, the Beko Bear virus. He's put the vaccine in several petri dishes and shared them with his fellow doctors to develop it around the world. But by accident, one of the 4 dishes actually contains the virus itself. Now, this shouldn't be too much of a problem, just phone up the doctors and leave them a message not to open it. But no, Dr. Asahi is worried about spies listening in and stealing the virus to use it as a weapon. So instead, he sends his 2 kids, Asao and Junko, to fly around the world, find and warn the doctors. Not gonna lie, this premise is a little dumb. It does turn out spies learn about the virus and try to steal it, but surely a phone call telling the doctors to immediately destroy it is a quick enough solution to avoid theft. For how much of an emergency this apparently is, sending kids after the doctors also feels pretty slow. But what does this virus even do? Something terrible. It makes people act like animals, and animals act like people. Now when an animal gets infected, this means they gain intelligence and the ability to talk. It lasts for a good while, if not being permanent, a potential scientific breakthrough with a ton of applications. But when a human gets it, they just act like an animal for a bit? Characters get infected with the virus and seem to recover and be fine after a few minutes. Maybe it's tended to be more severe, but we don't really see it. These different symptoms are not equal, and it really doesn't help the stakes when Asao and Junko bring their dog, which ends up being infected with them, and the dog infects a bunch of people by biting them. So the virus gets spread anyways? If the point is to stop the virus getting out, they didn't do a good job. The story just doesn't make a ton of sense. The premise of stopping the Beko Bear virus doesn't work. They go about stopping it in a really roundabout way and end up spreading the disease a ton. And then there's this part, which I have to talk about. When the kids are in China trying to find one of the doctors, Asao ends up kidnapped, almost executed for being an alleged spy, and is then rescued by Son Goku. You know, from Journey to the West. He needs Asao's help because the air has been polluted by nukes, and the two of them go to a nuclear missile base and stop a launch, but then it's too late and it ends up all being a dream. Tezuka just put in this really weird anti-nuke non sequitur. It never comes up again. And if we include the wonderful journey from 1950, this makes 2 times Tezuka's put in a non sequitur dream sequence when a character travels to China and a series about going on a journey around the world. But, taking a step back, what's the manga actually about? Over the course of their trips through several countries, Asao and Junko will meet many different cultures. These frequently hinder them or catch them off guard, and by the end, the lesson the characters arrive at is not to believe in superstition over science and medicine. So that's a strange journey, a messy plot, a lot of weird stuff, and a lesson on science over faith. Also a shoehorned in moral about how nukes are killing Son Goku. But now it's time for the return of a legend. Not just a remake of something from the 40s, but a remake of a work from the 30s. The first thing Tezuka ever made, that I know of. Introducing Pin Pin Namachan, or Pin Pin Sei-chan, aka Lively Little Sei, a remake of Tezuka's 1938-ish work of the same name. This sees the return of the first Tezuka star, this bald child named Sei, with Tezuka himself portraying his older brother. It's a comedic series about the family and the fun things they get up to. Admittedly, I don't have much to say on its actual quality or content, even less, I can't really compare it to its original version since I couldn't read it. Even the 40s incarnation I got is just a single page, so there's not a lot to compare to. But at the very least, I think it's cool that Tezuka rebooted his earliest work 20 years later. And now for something a bit different. Origin Sekai, or The Ant Colony, is the first novel we actually get to look at. Not a short story, but an actual 160-odd page novel. Now, this puts me in a bit of a spot when it comes to assessing quality. While I can use a translator to get the gist of the plot, judging Tezuka's actual writing quality, his prose, word choice, and sentence structure isn't something I can really do. So for entries like this, I'll just get the premise of the plot, anything else I feel like mentioning, and then just move on. I guess this also goes for the more text-heavy picture stories whose quality I also can't fully attest to, but at least with those I get more pictures. At any rate, the ant colony opens on a driver seeing a glowing humanoid figure at night. These figures have been appearing around a quarry, which has the owner contact a local detective agency. Otori Shinsaku, possibly related to Bon Shinsaku, takes up the case, and a local kid named Akira and his dad also become involved when they happen upon a hidden cave. It seems that ant people are a hidden race that have survived by staying hidden from humanity, living underground or in mountains. Also, while described as ant people, they aren't really insectoid. They're more so described as glowing bird face-like things. They're also not exactly hostile, but once their home is discovered, they decide to make a new one below Tokyo, which is a bit of an issue when their tunnels would likely cause mass destruction for all the above-ground buildings and people. And that's the premise. I don't have much else to say about it. The plot's alright, but since its quality hinges so much on the writing, I'm just not confident enough to say whether or not it's good or bad. Maybe someone who understands Japanese could say something about the quality of the writing, but as for me, I just think it's neat we got to talk about a novel. A nice little change of pace. On to something more typical, Oyamano Sangoro of the Mountains, follows a boy named, of course, Sangoro. He started his first day at a new school, but not just any school, a Tanuki school. His classmates initially don't like the idea of having a human there, but gradually they warm up to each other. The manga gives us some fun little stories about school life, and usually involves them meeting some other animal group. It's a nice little series for kids to enjoy the animal characters. Not much else for me to say about this one either. Let's change that. Film Wa Ikite Iru, The Film Lives On, is definitely more interesting when looked at in context of Tezuka's future works. Infinitely more interesting when you know his whole career. But first, recall Aoi 3. That manga starred one Sasaki Kojiro, and he meets another guy named Miyamoto Musashi. These characters were based on the famous Japanese swordsmen with the same names, and they joked about being destined to duel in the future. Tezuka never got to write that fight in Aoi 3, but he'd realize it here, in the film lives on. Introducing Miyamoto Musashi, a young artist whose dream is to work in animation. He applies to a studio, but isn't hired. They say his art is good, but lacking motion. Dead. Instead, he goes into manga, and while he struggles a bit, he makes a friendly rival in another artist, Sasaki Kojiro. His dream is also to work in animation, but disagreements cause them to go their separate ways. Musashi ends up being the young lady of a local Yakuza group, and ends up injuring his eyes in a fire. Gradually going blind, haunted by his dreams, and after being given a biography on Beethoven by the animator he looked up to, Musashi becomes determined to make his animated film at all costs. Even if he goes blind, he'll make his movie, about a horse named Blue. The film lives on is a good story about the passion and drive of an artist and following one's dreams, the struggle towards a hard-to-reach goal, the dissatisfaction of settling for something else. For Tezuka, a lover of animation since childhood, this must have been a heartfelt work. Maybe not one-to-one, but there could have been some reflection of Tezuka's real feelings here. There's also a subplot revolving around a well-respected mangaka, with many students who just mimic his style. He hates it because to him, it's all derivative. Then Musashi comes along and finally does something different. Even when his students hate Musashi, he loves the drive and originality. Now, I have no proof of this, but I like to think it's a veiled commentary by Tezuka of the manga industry at the time. Or maybe not. Maybe a character is just a character. There's so much I could say about the film lives on, but it wouldn't make any sense right now. Just trust me when I say the eventual payoff will be really good. In the meantime, there's a really fun page Tezuka includes. In a sequence where he writes about the animation process, he includes this graph of the worldwide animation industry. America's the biggest, of course. He lists Disney, Fleischerworks, and a bunch of other famous old cartoons. He puts down China, with Princess Iron Fan getting a mention, a film that Tezuka really enjoyed. Russia gets a spot with the 1947 film The Humpbacked Horse. Hey, that one also features a blue horse. What a weird coincidence. And then, wait, Canada? What the heck is Norman McLaren's blankety blank? Well, this is different. But with that, it's time to move on from the film lives on. For now at least. Next up, we have Kujaku Guy, translated as Kujaku Shells, but is sometimes referred to as the Green Pearls. A weird name considering pearls don't appear in the story. It's a short manga about a boy, who I'll just name Rock, washing up on a primitive island. They usually kill all foreigners, but Princess Lima takes liking to him, so Rock manages to stay alive. He and Lima start to grow close, he tries to improve the island with his modern knowledge, but the local king and fortune teller keep getting in the way. Ultimately though, the story doesn't have a happy ending, and the theme is once again not letting superstition get the better of you. On to something a little more lighthearted. Fabre Sensei Nobushi Monogatari, or Professor Fabre's Insect Stories, is a short educational manga featuring real-life entomologist Jean-Henri Fabre. He says hello to the audience, shrinks us down to book size, and for a few pages we follow a dung beetle and learn what their dung balls are for. Another work showing Tezuka's love of bugs while he tries to educate the audience. Next is Super Taiheki, which is actually another successor manga. This time around, Tezuka's returning to 53's people with pistols on their heads. If you'll recall, that story features a young boy inventor. Well, it's time to recycle that concept, but with a sci-fi twist. The story starts when time travelers warp themselves back to Edo period Japan. A father, mother, and baby step out of their time machine, and a local monk goes to investigate. He accidentally throws a switch, the time machine turns on, the mother and father make a mad dash to return, and they leave their baby behind. Abandoned, the child is found and adopted by a local thief woman, who names him Komosuke. Why couldn't the time-traveling parents just return to the moment they left and grab their child? Don't worry about it. They do find him eventually though, but when Komosuke isn't thrilled at the concept of abandoning all he knows to go with these random strangers, they leave him a science book and tell him to learn. And so Komosuke starts an apprenticeship. His higher-ups give him a hard time, but he reads the book and gets by with his smarts and the occasional invention. Alongside this is a plotline around his adopted mother giving up her thieving ways to be a better person, and a friend of the family Ronin helping them both out. Super Taiheki definitely has more of a plot than its inspiration. It can be a little silly in terms of science, but if you roll with it, it's pretty alright. Komosuke himself admittedly isn't that interesting to me, but the supporting cast like his mother and his master are pretty good. Overall, it's a pretty decent read. Jungle Taro starts us off with a bang, that is to say, with a nuclear test. People flee the site, but leave behind the nearby animals. Luckily, they manage to work together and build a raft off to sea in time, only to come across a sinking vessel. From this sinking vessel comes more animals and a guy named Taro, who's secretly a martial arts instructor for the UN and has the ability to talk to animals. The part I find harder to believe is a guy this young being a martial arts instructor for the UN, but kids manga. Together, they all form an unlikely family, including a young dog named Hanpen, an older dog, Top, a prissy cat named Missy, and more. Eventually they will find their way onto an island, but find Japanese soldiers still convinced World War II is ongoing. This was a real thing after the war, look it up sometime. But it turns out the Commander Lamp already knows the war ended. The island has a secret, and Taro, alongside his animal friends, will have an interesting time discovering it. Right off the bat, a decent setup. We have a found family of varied characters who don't always get along. Mainly the cat is a source of annoyance for the others. But then we get to the island and the situation continues to increase in severity. Taro decides he needs to protect the island's secret for the world's safety. The only problem, aside from some of the animal characters not having much purpose in the story, is that it ends too soon. I'm not seeing info about Jungle Taro getting prematurely cancelled, but it feels like it's missing a chapter or two. Essentially, the plot ends at the emotional climax, but not at the conclusion of the actual narrative. It doesn't mean the rest of the manga isn't a solid read, it just leaves Jungle Taro feeling a little anticlimactic. For a short story, we have Jet Kichi no Yurei, Ghost of the Jet Base. A military base has been seeing ghosts, so HQ sends an investigator to find out what's happening. The commander warns him not to dig too deep into the issue, but is then spotted trying to burn evidence. The investigator then finds out that the commander accidentally shot down Allied planes and is trying to hide the proof. When enemy planes attack, the two will team up to fight them off, but when the commander tries to save himself by shooting the investigator under the guise of combat, the haunting shadows of the ghost cause him to fall to his death. A more tragic wartime short from Tezuka. Time for another plain story, but with a complete opposite tone. Tobe Tabaru Runchan, or Fly Little Lun. In a world of sentient planes, there's Lun, a tiny plane no one uses. He's actually about to be scrapped when a little kid named Kazu takes him, fixes him up, and Lun becomes his pet? Yeah, I'm gonna go with pet. The manga gives us some adventures of the two flying around, going to school, and see what whales look like. Classic tale of a boy and his pet plane. While you may expect the next entry to continue the plane trend, Jet King, funny enough, doesn't really feature a jet. Instead, it's about a young boy named Matchan with an active imagination. He gets easily distracted in class, too engaged in his fantasies. They say he reads so much manga he can't distinguish reality anymore. Until one day, something strange starts happening. Matchan learns how to transform his body. He then discovers an old family heirloom helmet that's weirdly high-tech, and that in truth, he's descended from aliens. Deciding to use his powers for good, he becomes Jet King, a superhero battling an army of criminals. Or maybe not. Maybe this is all in his head. Jet King plays around with the idea that Matchan is an unreliable narrator. We aren't fully sure if everything's all in his head, or if he really is a superhero. But then the manga asks the question, does it matter? Even if it's in his head, are the lessons he learns on heroism pointless? Jet King feels like a response by Tezuka to people who think reading fiction manga is pointless, as if he's saying, even if it is fiction, there's still value in the stories and lessons they tell. Maybe he wasn't thinking too hard about it and just wanted to write something fun, but that's how it came across to me. I wish he played around with the unreliable narrator aspect a bit more though. It only comes up a handful of times when there's so much you could do with it. It'd be really cool if he went all in. But regardless, Jet King stands as a nice little action manga and in defense of the reader's value on an impressionable youth. And speaking of impressionable youth, next is Donguri Koshin Kyoku, the Acorn March. Taking place sometime after World War II, we follow Kinoshita Tokichiro, a boy struggling through the turbulent times. His father is employed by the American military, which leads to a lot of teasing at school, especially from one Oda Nobunaga. The Acorn March follows Tokichiro as he learns not to solve problems through violence, that complete pacifism isn't always the answer either, and his journey to become a publisher and change the world through his writings. Now, even if you aren't a savant of Japanese history, you may have heard the name Oda Nobunaga and started to wonder if Tezuka's making another historical reference. And he is, because Kinoshita Tokichiro is more commonly known as Toyotomi Hideyoshi, The Acorn March is loosely based on him, though obviously with some creative liberties. Even without the illusions, the series reminds me a bit of Aoi 3, repeating character designs probably contributing to that. It doesn't go quite as far, but I always enjoyed Acorn March and would have liked to see a longer version of the story. Taking us back to the world of shoujo manga, we have Akebono-san. We open on a play, as a ballerina is tragically killed when a prop dagger is replaced with a real one. It wasn't unexpected though, as she was wearing the Devil Shoes, a pair of red shoes that making the best dancer in the world, but are said to make everyone who wears them meet a tragic end. They also have a counterpart in the Angel Shoes, white and said to not improve dancing, but guarantee happiness. We then meet Akebono, a young girl whose family passed away in a disaster. Working to provide for her younger siblings, she comes across the Devil Shoes when a dancer named Mosiko tries to hide her theft. After putting them on, she dances onto the street and almost gets herself run over by a crime boss. Said crime boss actually takes a liking to Akebono, reminding him of his dead daughter. Akebono distances herself from him, leaves the shoes behind, and ends up making her way to ballet school. There, she ends up being given the Angel Shoes and struggles hard to learn how to dance. We'll follow her journey to be a ballerina while Mosiko tries to get the Devil Shoes back, and the Devil Shoes themselves tempt those around them. I quite enjoyed Akebono-san. It's a classic tale of hard work versus the tempting shortcut. Akebono is a sweet and likable protagonist, and I quite like the crime boss as well, being a bit of a bad person, but still a tragic guy you can sympathize with. Another decent shoujo outing from Tezuka. Next, we've got a few short entries in a row, starting with Terubi no Kuni no Aya-chan, or Aya-chan in TV Land. It's about a little girl named Aya, along with her cat and dog, getting sucked into her TV into the titular TV Land as they try to find their way back home. Suru no Onga Eishi, The Crane Repays a Favor, is another adaptation of The Grateful Crane, like the previously covered Wellspring of the Crane. We actually have a set of returning fairy tales as we cut to Shiroyuki Hime to Oji-sama, Snow White, and the Prince. The second Snow White adaptation in this video is since Tezuka only did the art for this, and the story was written by one Miyawaki Norio. Kani no Hebi, The Crab and the Snake, is based on the folktale Kani no Ongaeshi, The Crab's Favor. A girl rescues a crab one day, while her father rescues a frog from a snake, promising the snake his daughter's hand in marriage in return. When the snake comes to collect the daughter, the crab returns the favor he owes by attacking the snake alongside all his crab friends. And taking us out of the fairy tales is Jack to Momonoki, Jack and the Beanstalk. Illustrations by Tezuka, story by Genichi Kume. Fairy tales and folk tales all seem to be picture books now. Makes you wonder why Tezuka stopped doing them as full manga like the early days. But for the Tezuka fans who wish he'd make more literary adaptations, we have Shakespeare's Benisu no Shonen, The Merchant of Venice. The classic story of the merchant Antonio getting into legal trouble with the moneylender Shylock. When his friend Bassanio asks Shylock for money with Antonio as his guarantor, Shylock seeks a pound of flesh when the debt can't be repaid. Meanwhile, Bassanio also seeks the hand of Portia, a rich heiress whose father left her marriage in the hands of a riddle. If you know the original story, it's mostly the same here. The setting's been updated to be a bit more modern, but the plot's very similar. There's some removal of more minor characters, the subplot of Shylock's daughter being upset, as well as Shylock being hated for being Jewish. This time around, he's just generally hated for being a bad guy. Overall, what can I say? It's a simplified but solid adaptation of Shakespeare. Can't go too wrong with that. Oh, wait a minute. I got so caught up in those adaptations, I missed something. But hold on. This isn't a manga. It isn't a picture book or a novel or illustration either. It's a TV series. Mighty Atom. But Mighty Atom, the first TV anime, came out in '63. This can't be right. That's cause it's not the anime. It's Mighty Atom, the live action show. That's right, before he was animated, Atom had a live action series. It lasted 65 episodes, and thankfully, we still have them instead of them being lost media. This might just be the earliest TV adaptation of Tezuka's work we still have. It's probably one of the earliest TV shows based on a manga in the world. I'm not saying it's the first, but maybe I'll have some more details on that later. As for the show itself, well, have you been looking at it? There's both a lot to say and very little to say in regards to it. It's not a hidden gem in terms of its quality. I'll save the more in-depth breakdown for another time, but for now, let's just admire this weird thing and the fact that it exists. Next up is Thrill Kase, or Dr. Thrill, The titular character is a medical doctor who winds up in various stories applying their expertise. But strangely, Dr. Thrill isn't really about Dr. Thrill. Instead, we mostly follow his son Kenta alongside their dog, Jip. While the good doctor may find himself defusing a bomb and planting in a diplomat's stomach, or treating the odd wound that gets him involved in the plot, Dr. Thrill the manga is much more like one of Tezuka's boy detective adventure series. We follow Kenta as he discovers a mystery or crime, gets in some action-filled fights, and solves the case. In a sense, it's pretty typical of Tezuka by this point. It doesn't stand out much from his previous similar series. But Dr. Thrill is funny to me in that A, the titular character plays more of a minor role, and B, Tezuka would eventually make a very successful series about a doctor solving medical cases. He was so close here, but a bit off the mark. Maybe if he made Dr. Thrill about Dr. Thrill, it'd be a bit more interesting. For a new take on an old staple, we're going back to short gag strips with Denshi Fujin, Mrs. Electro. This is a comedy series focused around the mom of an average family centered around electronic devices. A joke based on an electric razor, one based on a fridge, and this was because this series was actually published in an appliance magazine. Having a popular mangaka make fun gag strips about your appliances is certainly one way to advertise them. And following it is Hikari, giving us a spiritual return to Tezuka's westerns. It doesn't take place in the Wild West, this is a time period with modern technology, but it follows a wandering hero of justice named Hikari. He journeys around on his horse, wields his pistols, and solves crime wherever he goes. One day he meets a little homeless child named Pen, who initially comes off as a fan, but in truth is after revenge. Pen's father was arrested by Hikari, and so they seek to kill him. But when it doesn't work out, the two make a deal. Pen can travel alongside Hikari for a year to see what he does and why. And if they don't manage to kill Hikari during that time, they give up on revenge forever. The manga will follow the two of them going town to town and having some adventures. Hikari's an overall decent action series. Lots of gunfights, some likable main leads, nothing much for me to say about it beyond that, except that Hikari ended up being a prototype for another more recognizable Tezuka series, one Dororo. There's a handful of similarities between the two works, but maybe I'll talk about those some other time. And moving on to a short story, Setsuna, or The Moment, starts with Rock driving down the road while being held at gunpoint. He and his assailant crash, with Rock waking up in a hospital. He's physically fine, but the mental scars have made so he can't bring himself to drive anymore. So to help him out, the doctor suggests making a new friend, and introduces him to a patient with amnesia. Amnesia he got from also being in a car crash. Not the best story ever, if anything it's a bit predictable, but The Moment was generally solid. And before we continue on to longer talking points, I think it's about time we do the usual roundup of miscellaneous works with too little info or not much to say about them. Don't worry though, it's pretty short this time. You know the deal by now, so let's get into it. 1955 cuts us a bit of a break, with just having 2 entries. The more obscure one is him making some mascot character called Pico-chan, though I'm not finding much about it. Though to compensate with something a little more interesting, we have the cover art for Lost World. Oh, not Tezuka's Lost World, don't be silly, but a story called Ushinomo Renta Sekai, or Lost World, made by Yasuhiro Kosaka. To be clear, this is not another adaptation of Tezuka's Lost World. Tezuka just did the cover art for this. From what descriptions I could find, it looks like it's a story about a fighter pilot battling aliens. 1956 also keeps it short. Starting off is Kosoku Ryoko Jidai, The Age of Lightspeed Travel. All I have for this is a single panel, which depicts a boy using a futuristic cheating device for a test. Aside from that, Tezuka was also the illustrator for Christmas Kodomokai, or Children's Christmas Party. Moving on to 1957, I actually don't really have much to talk about, but I did find something through my research. Uchu Ryoko, Space Travel. This looks to be some publication of actual Lost World, with a different name, and art probably from the original print of the 48 edition. I have no idea what this is or why it has a different title. I'm gonna guess it's some otherwise normal edition of Lost World, but I discovered it and thought it was worth mentioning. Moving on, 1958 contains a work titled Sonata Himoten Matsuki, The Story of Sonata Himoten. No other info. There's also an illustration for something called Nakayoshi, or Good Friends, and it looks like Tezuka did a one-page work titled Suki Rocket, or Moon Rocket. Finally, into 1959, we have... I'm not too sure. Tokusatsu Monogatari, the poisoning story, comes up as included in one of Tezuka's novel collections, but what I have of it seems to be a 2-page discussion by Tezuka on the use of magic poisons or potions in media. It feels like a commentary for something. I'm not sure if the poisoning incident is an actual story and if this is just a lead up to it or some kind of epilogue, but I can say it at least exists. Other works that look like short stories include Hagaki no Kaidan, Ghost Stories on Postcards, Kaigaki Jitsu wa Sugata Naki Kaichiken, Strange True Story The Invisible Mystery, and Nihon Ichi no Obake Yashiki, Japan's Most Haunted House. Finishing us off is Hanen da Darada, Guess the Culprit, which I assume is another one of those puzzles for kids to read and figure out. And that's the end of the miscellaneous segment. Told you it was smaller this time around. We'll have to see how big the next videos is, but in the meantime, back to your regularly scheduled content. We've got 2 heavy hitters before the 50s are over, each one multiple volumes long, a bit uncommon around this time. And we begin with Majin Garen, the Devil Garen. It all starts with an object falling from space. A tiny piece of it breaks off, but it and the main mass both land in Japan. Professor Tawara takes possession of it, the meteor containing a ton of metallic parts that go together as if intended to be assembled, forming a giant metal man, Garen. As for the part that broke off, it led to the countryside, where a man finds a baby in a crater and adopts it. The boy takes on the name Pick, and as time passes, he doesn't seem to age like a normal human. So how do Garen and Pick relate to each other? It takes a few years, but once they learn how to activate Garen, it turns out he can't be controlled. The metal giant acts on its own, doesn't really communicate, and destroys everything in its path in search of something. His missing part is Pick, who is Garen's heart, so to speak. He even has a heart-shaped pilot seat. When together, Garen follows his orders. He even becomes capable of speech and thought. But when separated, Garen will do everything to find his missing piece. But why are they here in the first place? Well, one day, Professor Tawara gets a vision from an alien culture. They tell him that Garen's a test to see if humans are dangerous and should be wiped out, or kind and should be spared. Unfortunately, unsavory people find out about the alien metal giant and try their best to take it for themselves. The professor dies, leaving his assistant Shikishima to look after things. Garen rampages around town, but eventually reunites with Pick and calms down for a bit. And so, Shikishima and Pick's brother Kenichi will try tirelessly to convince people to accept Garen and use him as a tool for good. But of course, things aren't that easy. If you're good at interpreting allegory and remember some of Tezuka's favorite themes, then it's clear this is a take on the evil science or weapons of mass destruction. Ultimately, Garen is neither good nor evil. He's a clueless giant with incredible powers, being guided by a well-meaning but impressionable child. There are those who want to use Garen for world conquest, there are those who want to destroy it despite the good it can bring, there are those who think the alien test aspect is something Shikishima made up. The initial premise of the manga is solid, with room to explore the morality of science as both a tool for good and bad things. But unfortunately, I don't think Devil Garen does a good job of it. If you pick up this series, it's about 4 to 5 volumes long. That's pretty lengthy compared to most Tezuka works by this point. Even having 2 volumes wasn't that common. The problem is, it doesn't really have a lot of story. In the beginning, we're introduced to Garen, we see how the scientific community reacts, and there's a bad guy named Tarantula who wants Garen to do evil stuff. Tarantula's defeated, everyone's happy, and then we get another bad guy who wants Garen to do evil stuff. And then another. And then another. Devil Garen honestly spends a lot of time repeating itself and not doing much narrative-wise. It's very formulaic. Somehow Pick and Garen will be separated, Shikishima and Kenichi get involved trying to reunite the two, and then we do it again. It gets pretty underwhelming after a while. Are the characters any good then? They're mostly pretty plain. Shikishima's good as a doctor trying to make good use of Garen to save the world, while constantly dealing with supervillains or an ignorant board of scientists. But Kenichi's sole character trait is looking after Pick, and Pick is mostly just a child who wants to live happily with Ken and Garen. As for our title character, Garen himself isn't mindless, but doesn't have much of a personality or character. I think this would have worked better if we didn't spend so much time with new criminal groups not getting the memo to not try and take Garen for themselves. I wish we spent more time dealing with the scientific community or society at large. There's an early scene where they put Garen and Pick on trial for their actions when they were controlled by Tarantula, and this idea was pretty interesting. How do you assign guilt to a mindless machine? But then a new villain literally crashes the court case and interrupts. I don't think I could come up with a more perfect analogy. Devil Guard is an exploration on the morality of science and technology being interrupted by a supervillain. This one just feels like wasted potential to me. Actually, I only realized this while editing, but food for thought. Garin is a giant robot, a mech, if you will, and he's essentially controlled by Pick from a cockpit of sorts. Is Garin the first piloted mecha in manga? The title usually goes to Mazinger Z, and granted, judging it gets a bit weird when Garin is sentient and Pick is technically more of a part of the mech, but I thought about it, and I'm just saying an argument could be made. Let me know what you guys think. Oh well, what's the next manga we're talking about? Zero Man? Is this some cute adventure about a boy who's part squirrel? Another series about how much Tezuka likes nature? Oh, wait a minute. This is actually pretty good. Okay, so Zero Man starts when two soldiers fighting a war crash, try to duel to the death, but then find a child about to be eaten by a tiger. They save the child, agree to look after it no matter who survives, and finish the duel with the Japanese man winning. He takes the child, agrees to raise him as his son, and finds out the young Ricky has a tail. Years go by, and when Professor Tatagami returns from an expedition studying Yetis, then in a press conference, he gives a strange warning. He speaks of Zero Men, a creature that's evolved beyond humans. He's even caught two of them, an adult male and female. They look just like regular people, save for their giant squirrel tails, and are superior physically and mentally. Events then transpire leading to Ricky coming into contact, revealing the two Zero Men to be his real parents. Then there's a figure in a black robe named King Enma, who replaces the Prime Minister with a double and turns Tokyo into a weird high-tech metropolis with super science. Ricky and Tatagami team up to uncover the conspiracy, Ricky properly reunites with his parents, they foretell the world will end in a little over 2 years, and then the family returns to the secret society of the Zero Men, a high-tech underground civilization led by a grand priest with a deep hatred of humanity. It's then revealed that King Enma is an agent of the Zero Men, a certain doomsday device starts to go haywire, and the promised time has come. The world is ending, and the fight between man and squirrel people to survive commences. And that is the first third of this manga. So yeah, Zero Man looks unassuming, but boy is it a trip. They give you that warning about the world ending and you figure it'll happen near the end, but then it comes much earlier and you wonder where the story could even go from there. You thought this was going to be a cute manga about a squirrel boy, but this is more like Next World or The Adventures of Rock. This is a serious story that explores the darker parts of humanity and racial prejudice. Dare I say, it's one of the best plots Tezuka's written by this point. You have Ricky as the optimistic lead struggling against a prejudiced world. You have a character named Pitt who hates the Zero Man and becomes a secondary protagonist following a human perspective. Then you have Lamp being an opportunistic scumbag and the Zero Man high priest whose spite won't allow him to make peace. Maybe a little one-note evil, but they work. You even have minor characters who go through real arcs as the story progresses. The writing here is genuinely pretty solid. My only real complaint is that I wish we had a more interesting villain, but for a narrative about pointless hatred and prejudice, I guess it fits. Besides that, some of the comedic relief can feel a bit out of place at times, but I guess Tezuka needs to keep this kid-friendly. There's more I could say about Zero Man, but I'll simply state that it's one of Tezuka's best works going into the 60s. I'm surprised it never got a real anime adaptation. I think it could be really good if given the chance. Or, well, they tried to give it one, but it didn't work out. I'll talk about that more when we get into the 60s. And that just leaves us with a bunch of shorter works to close out the video. Continuing on, we have Rakuban, or Cave-in. Two miners walk into a cave, the younger Okumura and the older Mayabashi. They have a discussion about memory, and then Mayabashi tells the story of the cave-in from 20 years ago. He describes how he was a hero who saved a fellow miner while failing to save another, but then Okumura produces an interview Mayabashi gave 10 years ago. In that interview, he describes the events a little bit differently, followed by another example where he describes it differently. Is this just a fun conversation about how memories change, or is there something more to this? I'll let you discover that answer for yourself, but overall, Cave-in's a good little short. Next is Shiro Kuchaku no Uta, Song of the White Peacock. After a war, the helmet of a fallen soldier is found, being guarded by a white peacock. The soldiers who found it decide to return the helmet along with the peacock to the man's family, and so Yuri and her mother welcome the bird as their pet. Yuri's dream is to play piano, and when the white peacock gets a response on TV, a dance it performs leads to her accompanying it with her piano playing. To help finances, the two become performers. Then the most unrealistic plot point ever happens, and people decide they just want her and not a dancing white peacock. Seriously, what kind of show isn't improved by a dancing albino peacock? At any rate, due to poor taste, the two become separated. But why does this bird know how to dance anyways, and why was it guarding that helmet? Another silent little story with a light touch of tragedy. For the last work I couldn't read from the 50s, we have the simply titled Hone, or Bone. It starts with a girl walking along one stormy night when she sees a woman on the side of the road with a bunch of bones by her feet. It all sounds very interesting and suspenseful, but I guess I'll have to keep wondering what the mystery is. Following that, Iwake-jo, or the Castle of Dawn, gives us one last period piece for the decade. This time around, it revolves around a lord trying to build a new castle, the titular Castle of Dawn. Inspired by Western architecture, it's meant to be a grand defensive structure against the forces of Tokugawa Ieyasu. The construction begins, but problems arise. The Lord's son Midori Maru sympathizes with the plight of the local villagers, officials are vying for positions, and to top it all off, someone's sabotaging the building efforts. Add in some relationship drama between Midori Maru, the noble Yayoi, and their present teacher Tai, and this is a good read. We see time progress, characters develop, and motivations change. Despite its short length, the story and characters feel fleshed out. Midori Maru leaves his noble life to live with Tai, but still cherishes his father and holds on to his samurai pride. And he's not the only one dealing with conflicting desires. There were times that reminded me of a Shakespearean tragedy. Maybe that's giving it too much credit, but I came out of Castle of Dawn really wishing it was longer. And if that's my chief complaint, I think it's a good mark of quality. In comparison to our next topic, Kodama-chan is mostly just average. We open on a family moving into a new apartment, consisting of a news photographer father, a mother, and their daughter Kodama. Things are going well, the three of them are living happily, but then, tragedy strikes. Kodama's father dies in an accident, and a figure from her mother's shady past returns. Inspired by her father, Kodama will use her love of photography to save her mother from this situation. I may not have much to say about it, but it's a perfectly fine manga overall. Shukan Tante Toko, the weekly detective, gives us one last detective series for the decade, and this time it's not a child, but an adult man and gory. The manga consists of several small standalone stories where he shows up to solve the case, sometimes even having an actual role. Yeah, a lot of the weekly detective consists of stories without the detective in them, save for the very end where he wraps everything up. Sometimes he's the main character, alongside his love interest working at the bar, but other times we focus on the criminal themselves or people otherwise involved in the crime. Tezuka definitely uses his more mature art style here, and covers some more adult themes at times. He really ran the gamut of detective-style stories this decade, didn't he? And finally, the last work of the 50s, Hana to Arakure, Flowers and Ruffians. A short work that's not really important in the grand scheme of things. At a northern fishing hut, a man named Ken arrives on the scene. This place is staffed by criminals, and he is the new recruit. The expected hazing commences, Ken finds himself at odds with the local boss, but he has a goal: to grow flowers even in this rough environment. The others make fun of him for it, but eventually, he wins them over, and the story shows how, even in a harsh environment, good things can grow when cared for. Not an especially great ending point for the video, Flowers and Ruffians is essentially just another average short manga, but maybe we can still admire its message. And with that, once again, we've reached the end of another video, and of another decade. Let's look back and think about how much Tezuka did in the 50s. He started several long-lasting franchises, dipped his toe into more adult-oriented series, experimented here and there. He certainly did just pump out the same repetitive material. Or, well, not as much as he could have. But for now, the 50s are done. We're moving on to the wonderful era of the 60s. Tezuka is very established by this point, but the coming decade may be just as important to his journey. Because in the 60s, Tezuka's gonna start taking a crack at that animation thing. It's time for the pioneer of anime to start making anime. And if that's got you interested, I hope you'll join me again next time on our journey through the works of Osamu Tezuka.